You know what is strangely unfair? Your brain can let you forget where you put your keys, what day it is, and half the conversation you had this morning. But at 11:48 p.m., it can suddenly deliver, in perfect high definition, that one embarrassing thing you said in 2017. You're lying in bed, the room is quiet, your body is tired, and then, without asking for permission, your mind replays a moment you did not order and definitely do not want. The joke that didn't land, the text you sent too fast, the time you waved at someone who wasn't waving at you, the weird tone in your voice during a meeting, the thing you said at dinner that sounded normal at the time and criminal 6 hours later. And the really uncomfortable question is not just why you remember it, it's why you remember it at night. Why does your mind suddenly become a private theater for shame, awkwardness, and social mistakes the moment the world goes quiet? Why do these memories feel more vivid in the dark? Why can something objectively small feel emotionally enormous when your head hits the pillow? Most people assume this is just overthinking, or anxiety, or a bad habit, and sometimes it is connected to all three. But there is a deeper psychological explanation hiding underneath it, a more interesting one too, because the mind is usually not torturing you for no reason. It is often doing something old, protective, and surprisingly logical. The hidden reason you replay embarrassing memories at night is that your brain is trying to update your social survival map when distractions finally disappear. That sounds dramatic, but human psychology is dramatic. For most of our history, social mistakes were not minor inconveniences. They could affect belonging, status, protection, access to resources, mating, alliances, and safety. We are a social species, which means the brain treats social pain with a seriousness that can feel excessive in modern life, but made perfect sense in the environments that shaped us. So when an embarrassing memory returns at night, your brain is often not simply remembering, it is reviewing, it is scanning, it is asking, did that threaten my place in the group? Did I damage how people see me? Is there something I missed? Do I need to fix it? Do I need to prepare better next time? That is why these moments do not just appear as neutral memory. They arrive charged with emotion. Your nervous system marks them as important, not because they were the biggest events of your life, but because they touched something ancient inside you, the need to belong without humiliation, the need to stay connected without rejection, the need to preserve dignity in a social world. And night is the perfect time for that process to become loud. During the day, your attention is outsourced. Messages, noise, work, errands, people, decisions, movement. Your brain is busy reacting to the present, but at night, that external demand starts to fall away. The task-positive systems quiet down. There is less incoming data to process, and what fills the gap is often internal material that never got fully digested. This is one reason psychologists talk about rumination as a habit of repetitive, unresolved thinking. But not all rumination starts as meaningless repetition. Often it starts as an attempt to solve something. The brain does not always distinguish well between useful reflection and endless replay. It begins by trying to extract a lesson, a pattern, a correction. Then it gets stuck in a loop. That loop can sound like this. Why did I say that? What did they think? Was there a pause after I spoke? Did I look insecure? Did they notice? Was I being annoying? Should I apologize? No, that would make it worse. Maybe they already forgot. But what if they didn't? Now, if that feels painfully familiar, there is something important to understand. This does not necessarily mean you are weak, broken, overly sensitive, or uniquely awkward. It may actually be a sign that your mind is highly attuned to social feedback. In psychology, this overlaps with things like self-conscious affect, rejection sensitivity, social evaluative concern, and threat monitoring. In plain language, it means your brain cares a lot about how interactions go because it is trying to protect you from social pain. That protection, however, can become distorted. The brain has a negativity bias. This is one of the most reliable findings in psychology. Negative experiences, threatening cues, and painful emotions tend to command more attention than neutral or pleasant ones. Your mind is less likely to replay the fact that your coworkers smiled when they saw you, and more likely to replay the 2 seconds where your sentence came out wrong and someone looked confused. Why? Because from a survival perspective, missing a threat has historically been more costly than overlooking comfort. So the brain prioritizes what might hurt, what might exclude, what might lower your status, what might lead to conflict. An embarrassing memory gets tagged as unfinished business, A pleasant memory often gets filed away much more quietly. This is also why people can receive 10 signals that everything is fine and still obsess over one awkward moment. The mind is not being fair, it is being vigilant, and vigilance becomes stronger under certain conditions. Fatigue is one of them. At night, when you are tired, your cognitive control is weaker. The prefrontal cortex, the part involved in perspective, regulation, and context, is not operating with the same strength it has earlier in the day. Meanwhile, emotional material can feel more immediate and less filtered. In other words, the adult narrator in your mind goes offline a little, and the inner alarm system gets a clearer microphone. This matters because embarrassing memories are rarely just memories. They are memory plus interpretation. They come with a story attached. Not just I said something awkward, but I exposed myself. I looked stupid. I lost credibility. People probably think less of me now. When you're tired, that interpretation can feel less like a thought and more like a fact. Another hidden piece is memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory, you do not simply pull it out of storage like a file from a cabinet. You reconstruct it, you rebuild it, slightly, in the present, which means each nighttime replay can strengthen not only the memory itself, but the emotional meaning attached to it. If every recall comes with shame, dread, and self-criticism, your brain learns that this memory is even more important and threatening than it originally was. So the habit feeds itself. You remember the moment because it feels important. It feels important because you keep revisiting it. You keep revisiting it because it feels unresolved. And it feels unresolved because the revisiting never actually resolves it. That is one of the cruel little tricks of rumination. It impersonates problem solving while quietly preventing closure. There is also a deeply social layer here that many people underestimate. Embarrassment is not just discomfort, it is a relational emotion. It exists in the space between you and other minds. You imagine yourself through their eyes. You feel the possibility of being seen in a way that lowers your self-esteem. So when the memory returns, you are not just remembering an action, you are simulating an audience, and that audience in your mind is almost always harsher than the real one. Psychology has long observed something called the spotlight effect. We tend to overestimate how much other people notice us, remember our mistakes, and analyze our behavior. You might replay a comment for 5 years while the other person forgot it before dessert. But your brain is not measuring reality objectively, it is measuring social risk, and because the self is at the center of your own awareness all day long, it is easy to assume it is equally central in everyone else's. It isn't. Most people are busy replaying their own embarrassing moments. Now, there is another reason these memories rise at night, and it has less to do with the moment itself and more to do with what nighttime represents psychologically. Night is when performance stops. You are no longer actively doing, producing, answering, or presenting. And when external roles fall quiet, unresolved feelings get a chance to speak. This is why some people do not only replay embarrassing moments, they replay conflicts, losses, worries, unfinished conversations, old regrets, and alternate versions of their life. Night becomes a container for the material that the day kept covered. In that sense, these memories are not random. They are often attached to themes your mind still cares about deeply: belonging, competence, attractiveness, acceptance, identity, dignity, control. The embarrassing memory is the door. The real issue may be behind it. Maybe the memory hurts because it touches a long-standing fear of being too much. Maybe it hooks into a childhood experience of being laughed at. Maybe it activates an old habit of perfectionism. Maybe it taps into social anxiety. Maybe it stirs up loneliness. Maybe it reminds you how much you want to be liked. Maybe it exposes a private characteristic you work hard to hide. This is why two people can experience the same awkward event and react completely differently. One person shrugs it off by lunch. Another replays it for months. The difference is not always the event. It is the meaning system around it. Attachment psychology helps explain some of this. If your early relationships taught you that approval was unstable, criticism was sharp, or belonging had to be carefully managed, then social mistakes may feel unusually high stakes. Your brain learns early what to scan for. Some people become especially skilled at tracking tone, facial expression, pauses, shifts in energy, little signs of distance. That can make them socially intelligent in some ways, but also vulnerable to overinterpreting harmless moments as danger. In that sense, the nighttime replay is not random suffering. It may be an old protective strategy doing its job too well. And this is where the conversation becomes more compassionate because many people attack themselves for having these thoughts. They think, why am I like this? Why can't I be normal? Why do I care so much? Why am I still thinking about something so small? But if you understand the psychology, a different explanation appears. Your mind may be trying to preserve connection. Your nervous system may be trying to prevent future pain. Your memory may be highlighting what it believes is socially important. Your thoughts may be searching for repair, even if they are doing it clumsily. That does not make the habit pleasant, but it does make it understandable. And once something becomes understandable, it becomes easier to work with. Before we get to what helps, there is one more hidden factor worth noticing. Embarrassing memories often replay at night because there is no immediate behavioral exit. During the day, if you feel awkward, you can message someone, distract yourself, work, walk, eat, scroll, talk, clean, or perform competence in some other area. At night, in stillness, there is nothing to do, so the mind does what minds often do in the absence of action. It thinks harder. This creates the illusion that more thought will produce more relief. Usually, it doesn't. In fact, the more you demand certainty from an inherently uncertain social memory, the more anxious you become. Did they judge me? Maybe. Maybe not. Was it as bad as I think? Probably not. Can I prove that completely? No. And the intolerable thing for an anxious brain is not always the mistake itself. It is the uncertainty around what it meant. So it keeps replaying. This is why the hidden reason is not just embarrassment. It is unresolved social uncertainty combined with fatigue, silence, and a threat-sensitive brain. And if you want to understand whether this pattern is becoming excessive, there are some signs. The replay starts interfering with sleep regularly. You feel dread before bed because you know your own thoughts are waiting for you. The memories become less about specific events and more about your identity, as in, I always do this, I'm just weird, I ruin things. You start avoiding social situations, not because you dislike people, but because you want to avoid future mental replays. That is when a normal human experience begins to slide into a more painful cycle of anxiety, low self-esteem, and behavioral restriction. Still, for many people, the pattern sits in a middle zone, not a disorder, not harmless, just a draining habit of mind. So what actually helps? The first thing is surprisingly simple. Stop treating every replay as a message of equal importance. A thought returning does not mean it is urgent, accurate, or useful. Repetition is not proof. Emotional intensity is not proof. Nighttime vividness is definitely not proof. It often just means your brain is tired and your internal world is louder. The second is to separate memory from verdict. Instead of, that moment proves I am socially incompetent, try, my brain is replaying a moment it tagged as socially relevant. That sounds small, but it is a huge shift in perception. One is identity, the other is process. One traps you inside shame, the other gives you a little psychological distance. This is a core principle in many therapeutic approaches, including cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness-based work. You do not have to argue with every thought. You just have to notice what category it belongs to. Is this useful reflection, or is this rumination wearing the costume of reflection? Useful reflection tends to be brief, specific, and actionable. I interrupted too much in that conversation. Next time, I'll slow down and ask more questions. Rumination is repetitive, global, and punishing. Why am I always like this? What is wrong with me? Everyone must think I'm unbearable. One leads to learning, the other leads to emotional quicksand. A third thing that helps is understanding the timing. If your brain tends to do this at night, do not wait until midnight to start supporting yourself. The mind is easier to guide before it gets hijacked. That may mean reducing overstimulation late in the evening, building a wind-down ritual, journaling unresolved thoughts before bed, or giving your mind a deliberate place to process the day so the bed does not become your brain's emergency meeting room. Some people benefit from a very plain question written down somewhere nearby. Is this a problem to solve or a feeling to soothe? Because many embarrassing memories are not asking for analysis, they are asking for regulation. The body is activated. The social self feels exposed. What helps is not more forensic investigation. What helps may be slowing the breath, relaxing the jaw, grounding attention, or speaking to yourself with the kind of tone you would use on a friend who felt stupid and ashamed. This matters more than it sounds. Self-criticism makes memories stickier. Compassion makes them less magnetic. When you respond to a painful replay with contempt, the nervous system reads that as additional threat. Now there are two problems: the original embarrassment and the current attack from within. But when you respond with something softer, the brain gets a different message. This memory is not a social emergency, and over time, that message changes the habit. There is also value in reality testing the social meaning of the memory, not obsessively, gently. Ask yourself, if someone else told me this story, would I judge them this harshly? If I witnessed this exact moment happen to another person, would I think about it for years? What are three more ordinary explanations for the other person's reaction? Could I be filling silence with fear? Often the answer is yes. Not always. Sometimes you really did say something awkward. Sometimes you misread a room. Sometimes the moment was uncomfortable. But even then, another piece of psychology becomes important. Humans are remarkably forgiving of ordinary awkwardness because they are busy managing their own. Social life is held together not by perfection, but by mutual tolerance of imperfection. That is one of the quiet secrets most people miss. You do not belong because you never misstep. You belong because missteps are part of being a person among people. And if you are someone who replays embarrassing memories because you are especially conscientious, reflective, sensitive, or socially aware, there is a bittersweet truth in that too. The same mind that notices tiny mistakes is often the mind that notices other people's discomfort, remembers details, reads emotional nuance, tries not to harm, and wants to connect well. The trait causing pain may be connected to a strength, it just needs boundaries. So the goal is not to become careless, it is to become accurate, not to feel nothing, but to stop turning every awkward moment into a character indictment, not to erase memory, but to understand what your memory is trying to do. Because once you understand the hidden reason, the experience changes shape. You realize your brain is not dragging you backward simply to be cruel. It is trying, in its own outdated and anxious way, to protect your social self. It is rehearsing, checking, reviewing, scanning for danger, trying to prevent future rejection. It is using memory as a form of preparation. But sometimes preparation becomes prison, and that is the part you can change. Not by force, not by demanding perfect calm, not by winning an argument with every thought at 1 a.m., but by recognizing the pattern sooner, by naming it for what it is, by giving your nervous system safety instead of more threat, by replacing harsh interpretation with honest perspective, by remembering that an embarrassing memory is not a prophecy, not a diagnosis, and not the full explanation of who you are. It is just one moment your brain marked in red ink, and brains do that, especially tired ones, especially anxious ones, especially human ones. So the next time the lights are off and your mind suddenly reopens a scene you did not ask to watch, notice what is really happening. This is not only memory, this is psychology. This is your mind trying to understand social experience, manage uncertainty, and protect belonging with tools that are ancient, imperfect, and sometimes a little too enthusiastic. That does not mean you have to follow it. You can let the memory arrive without turning it into a trial. You can feel the sting without building a whole identity around it. You can remind yourself that everyone has a private archive of strange, awkward, painfully vivid moments. You can understand that the night magnifies things. You can accept that your thoughts are louder when the world is quieter. You can choose not to confuse volume with truth. And maybe most importantly, you can stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" A better question is, "What is my mind trying to protect right now?" That question changes everything. It turns self-judgment into curiosity. It turns shame into information. It turns a cruel habit into something you can actually understand. And when you understand it, you are no longer just trapped inside the replay. You are watching the mechanism. You are seeing the old logic underneath the modern discomfort. You are beginning, quietly, to outgrow it.